Well, happy Saturday, folks. The real Captain Kirk here. We're live from One Bethlehem Plaza here in downtown Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Another gloomy Saturday here. Again, good news, the nor'easter-like storm, heavy rain here, is moving out, and so we should have a nicer Sunday here. But again, a gloomy Saturday, hopefully some brightening skies and a nicer Sunday on the way. Again, we've had the wettest May in history here, going back to 1953 here in the Lehigh Valley of eastern PA, which is kind of the theme here for May. It was a very, very wet May, to say the least. May trends here, this is again, as of today, looking at about the coolest in 4 years nationally, 19th coolest in 40 years, so below average national temperatures, and really so from New Mexico through the central U.S., Tennessee Valley, Ohio Valley into the Northeast. 12% wetter than last year makes it the number one wettest nationally in over 40 years, so much above average on that front. Hot 90 Fahrenheit days are down about 14% versus last year, still 10th most in 40 years. So real cool was the theme here in the Great Lakes Northeast, and obviously very, very wet along the East Coast, and they could certainly use some rain there in the heartland. Western Corn Belt there in Iowa is just bone dry. Looking at hot 90-degree days, we've had virtually none here in the Northeast, but nationally, again, there's been some in the West, obviously in the South, but down 1% versus last year, so not a huge change from year over year. But here in the Northeast, just a huge change, down 87% versus last year, least in 17 years. Might get a day or two here this week near 90 in the Northeast, again, but way down from last year. Drought status here, again, theme last year was least in many years. Only 26% of the country had dry to drought phases last year. Map right, map left shows this year's 51%, so almost double. Again, expanding west, central Rockies into the northern Central Plains. Again, the most in several years here in terms of dry to drought phases. But again, the good news is the drought in the east has pretty much been vaporized here with the wettest May. Look at the Equatorial Pacific here. So we're kind of in a neutral phase here. So we're gone from La Niña. Now we're just kind of into a neutral phase. Now the models left here just pretty much all tend to agree. Again, there's some wide ranges there again with some of the CPC models. But net is both IRI models tend to tell us it's going to be a neutral phase, meaning no El Niño, no La Niña for the rest of 2025. Hurricane season starts tomorrow. Again, official start of meteorological summer as well. So 1 June. These are some of the names: Andrea, Barry, Chanel, Chantal. So I'll see if your name's on the list there. But our threat areas, again, we're predicting about 17 named storms. We made this a year ago. CSU, Colorado State, just came out with a similar forecast of 17, and I think the Hurricane Centers came out with 13 to 19. So everyone's leaning above average, and our high threat areas will be east coast of Florida this year as opposed to west coast. Again, this system with the cycles and ensophase and other cycles all suggest storms getting a little closer to the east coast than last year. So Caribbean high risk, but again, so eastern Florida, mid-Atlantic, northeast coast, again, are some of the higher threat areas. Maybe the Gulf Coast, again, more earlier in the season, but later in the season, again, Florida and the Northeast would be our highest risk areas. Look at severe weather here, ending 28 May here. We added a little bit down week, not as severe as the previous week, but still 60 tornadoes, 224 hail events, 424 wind cases. Tornadoes now, while they're still well above average, are 7% less than last year. Hail's right about the same as last year, and wind cases are still the most in 14 years nationally. Fourday outlook here again shows the threat in the mid-Atlantic East Coast is over as the Northeasters lifting out. Threat now will shift down into Texas and then back into the Central Plains, and then on day 4 again back into the Midwest. Looking at last week, world summer ending here today, the ending of 31st of May, it was 2 degrees cooler than last year, coldest in 4 years, 11th coldest in 40 years nationally, so below average national temperatures again. Hot 90-degree days were down about 30%. So a little slightly below average on that front, and 37% wetter than last year, wettest in 10, 8th wettest in 40 years. So cool wet is not the theme we like to see for retail seasonal sales and our big clients. Again, just a very challenging May, to say the least. Not so up in Canada, again. Hot, warmest in 39 years up there. Explains why they're having some big fires. We'll talk about that in a minute here. Cold in India, crazy cold. Number 1 coldest in 40 years, and second wettest in 40 years. A couple typhoon-type events. Looking at this week here, week ending 7 June, so this is the start of meteorological summer. About 2.6 cooler than last year, coolest in 3 years, still 13th warmest. Again, we're going to get a couple warm days, mid, maybe high 80s, even near 90 here in Lehigh Valley, eastern PA. So we'll see here. And then a cooling trend, of course, as we get into the weekend. 90 Fahrenheit days nationally are still down 31% versus last year, least in 8 years. Rainfall up again, 23% wetter than last year, wettest in 6 years. So again, very heavy rain there in the Central Plains. Again, they'll take it. They need it because it's been got the crops in the ground, and again, they'll welcome this rain here. Looking at Sahara Dust here, again, this is typical in June, and again, it's a suppressing factor for tropical activity. So big slugs coming off of Africa here and heading toward the south. So again, this can be a pollution factor, obviously, and it can create some asthma and allergy suffering across say, Texas, Louisiana, into parts of Florida. The other factor here we're watching is just these big fires up here, a little further east than they were a couple years ago up in Canada, again, but big fires. Again, some of these fires are actually impacting population centers, unlike a couple years ago. But you can see the 3-day animation here, some of that smoke. So if your sunsets look a little prettier or the sky's a little hazier, again, we can blame the fires up there in Canada. And this will be a theme probably for the next at least month or so, again, with some dry weather up there in Canada. Looking at next week ending mid-June, 14 June, at this week prior Father's Day, still 1.7 cooler than last year. It's 15th warmest. So again, cooling off here. Again, we get a brief couple hot days here, maybe in the east this week, and then next week back to some cooler trends. Number one wettest in 40 years. We'll see about that. Models are hinting at some kind of tropical system. Again, I say they like to hallucinate this time of year, but they have been kind of consistent, showing some kind of tropical feature in the north central Gulf and then spreading up the east coast. We'll see. But again, 'tis the season to start watching the tropics for tropical activity. If we just aggregate these world 2-week trends here, the general theme is, again, remains generally hot in the Pacific Northwest, hot in Western Europe, a little bit cooler in Eastern Europe, and a little bit Central and East cooler in the U.S. Pretty warm down under in Brazil. Looking at the precip outlook here again, so above average rainfall across the southern tier of the country into the heartland, a little bit on the east coast here, again, depending on that tropical system, and above average rainfall there in Brazil. They'll take it. They're getting their crops out of the ground here. So that, folks, have a great week ahead here, and we'll talk to you this time next week.